I love that I can kind of guide people to be able to see themselves in the world a little bit differently, and to have interest in the world in a different way, and hopefully help them kind of reach different parts of who they are.
And you can do that through ballet, hey?
100%. 100%.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
How?
Come watch me.
I want to go back a little bit to some of the early days. And as I mentioned to you before we get going, a lot of your story has been covered over the years and written about and even in a documentary. But just for people who don't know, so you're from Zolani in South Africa, which is just a couple hours away from Cape Town. You started dancing when you were a really young kid. I saw videos of you dancing when you were just a little boy.
Oh, God.
But like what I can see is just like, well, you tell me. Like, what do you remember about how you felt when you were dancing? I'm not talking about ballet. When you were dancing in your community, around your house.
I just bliss. I think as a South African, we're born dancing. It's part of our culture, and it was part of my upbringing too. My mom used to dance when she was younger, not professionally, but my cousins, my older brothers danced a lot. So I grew up around dance and music. So it felt a part of who I was, a part of my personality from a young age, and everyone in the community knew me as a dancer before, I knew what dancing really was.
Eventually, you end up going to ballet classes, but you don't really love it right away, right? You didn't love ballet right away.
No, ballet is very hard to fall in love with.
What do you mean by that?
There's so much discipline. It's such a foreign way to move. It's such a, it's so unique, it's not always natural. And for someone like me who's a natural mover, I love playing with rhythm. It's so structured, and I think that structure and that restriction to be perfect in something was really hard to get used to because there wasn't a lot of room for interpretation. There's only one way to do it.
And you were sort of used to interpretation in your dancing.
Absolutely. It's all about self-expression. But in ballet, it's the opposite. You have to be so disciplined for so long in order to be able to self-express later on. But those early years are incredibly difficult to get through.
So the story is this Canadian couple is visiting. They're doing like a sabbatical. They see you dancing. They encourage you, and through the jigs and the reels, you end up coming to Canada as in the National Ballet. Is there a part of you that's like, even though you were like a baby or like you were a child, it's just like, I don't know, man, I don't want to dance. I don't know if I want to dance ballet.
No, because dancing ballet was linked with greater opportunities for me at a young age, and I think I was fortunate enough to understand that. As difficult as it was to be in such a foreign art form, I just knew that, one, I could do it physically. I love dance. I knew that I was able to do it. It never felt like impossible. And two, I felt in my soul that this was the one thing that would lead me to greater opportunities and to make something, work out in my life. Because I'm from a community that's, filled with poverty, So I just knew dance was my way out. And then when ballet came into my life, it just became clear that I had to choose that path.
What do you remember about the day you came to Canada?
Oh, my God. Everything just was big. I never really been to a big city. And in South Africa, we don't have huge cities like this. We don't have skyscrapers like this. And everything was huge. The cars were big. The roads were big, the people were big, and it was summertime, it was hot, and it was alive. It just felt like the rhythm was different, everything was faster paced, and I was just filled with so much excitement. Everything was exciting. I remember I landed on Canada Day. It was my first day in Canada, and we went... I remember my family here, we were like, we're going to go by the water, we're going to ride our bikes. And they're like, can you ride a bike? I was like, of course I can ride a bike. So we all went down by the water towards the fireworks. And it was like a, in 2010, welcome to Canada moment.
What a day to be welcomed into the country. Hey, everyone waving flags. You're thinking to yourself, is it like this every day?
What's going on here?
How come there's no fireworks tomorrow night?
Yeah, right.
How old were you?
I was 11.
In the video I watched of you, You seem understandably homesick, and you miss your mom. How did you get through that?
You know, I honestly grateful to my family, my Canadian family, because that was one of the most important things, was to stay connected to my family at home. And, you know, we would FaceTime as much as we could. And I would visit home twice a year. So every summer and every winter. And the ballet school was very understanding of that. So I would go for our summer break, and then in the winter, I would do a few shows of Nutcracker, and then they were graceful and gracious enough to let me go home so I could be there for an extended period of time every year.
Well, not to dwell on it, but it must have been real. You must. I mean, I can't imagine being 11 years old and being that far away from my family. It must have been, the homesickness must have been real.
Yeah, it was. You know, I think as you're growing up, I think, you know, in my industry, it requires so much discipline.
Yeah.
And so much of yourself, and it takes away so much of your life in a lot of ways. I was grateful that I had that to keep me going. But, you know, it's hard to grow up in a different culture that is so different from the one you knew and idolized growing up, in a sense, and not being kind of in it. Those were the difficult moments. But, you know, my mom and I are tight, you know, so it was never her specifically. Obviously, I miss her hugs, you know, I miss her just like jokes, but it was just more being around my people and being around the music and being around my cousins and my nieces and nephews. It was the whole picture that made me homesick a lot.
What I'm hearing so far is sort of this tension between self-expression and discipline. And this thing I'm really struck by this thing you told me that you said. The thing about ballet is if you want to express right away because you're a dancer, you want to express. Dancing is all expression. I want to express right away. But you actually have, in ballet, you have to put in all of these years of intense discipline before you're able to express yourself. So when you come to the National Ballet School and you start learning, and again, you're not crazy about ballet. This is something you kind of did because it was a nice opportunity for you. Can you give me an example of when it clicked at the National Ballet School?
I would say probably going into grade 9. So what is that, 14?
Yeah.
Is when it clicked to me. I think my social circle at that point was pretty clear. And I was, you know, I was just started feeling comfortable. You know, the teachers were, you know, that's when you also start learning new things, and ballet gets a little harder, so there's new challenges, you know. I would say around grade 9 it started to click. But, you know, I didn't know that I could also join a company. So there was a point where I felt like I was just doing it and I was good at it. But there's so many other aspects to being a classical ballet dancer, right? Like at the back of my head, always just my stature. Will I be able to be, you know, I didn't see a lot of, I know I say this all the time, representation. So it became difficult in other ways. So the physicality and the training was becoming easier, but then the doom of like, will I be a professional? Right. Will I be good enough? Will I be accepted to be in a company was like the next phase of, is this the right thing for me? You know.
Are you aware now that you were exceptional?
I think I always felt it in me. You know, when you grow up and you're 6 years old and people on the street stop you to dance and they want to see you express yourself.
I don't know about that. I'll be honest with you. That's not a relatable thing for me. No, that didn't happen to me a lot growing. You know that thing, Tom, where you're 6 years old and you're walking down the street in Newfoundland, people are like, dance for me. No, right. I don't. Siphe?
Maybe it was storytelling for you, you know, at a young age.
I'm sorry, continue on. Yes, I understand what you mean.
And
yeah.
It's a feeling that you don't recognize when you're young, but I always felt there was something there for me with dance. And so that carried me through a lot, because regardless of if I made it, quote unquote, into a ballet company, I just knew people wanted to see me dance, and that was enough for me. I came to terms with that a long time ago. And so that kept me going.
What did you miss out on? Because I have to also mention that these are years, I didn't know this until I came up here, that you don't get to have a typical teenagehood when you go to the National Ballet School. Generally, you don't get to go out and eat a whole bag of chips to yourself and get drunk in the woods and play video games for 8 hours a day. Not like I did or anything like that.
Right.
Do you ever feel like you missed out on anything of a normal teenage life? Can you talk to me a little bit about that, about how your teenage years might be different than another person's teenage years?
I mean, it's funny. I feel like I lived a whole life before I moved to Canada. So by the time I got here, I felt like I had experienced what teenagehood would be like, even though obviously I hadn't. Just growing up in South Africa, we were always outside, always playing, always exploring, doing those things at a very young age, at like 10. But when I was here, you go to the ballet school, you start around 8, and you leave the ballet school at 6:30 every day, you know. And so you don't have a lot of time to socialize. You don't have a lot of time to yourself, really, because you have to do your homework, you have to get ready for bed, and then you do it all again. But the great thing about the school is that there's an international community of kids who are all there for one thing. And so we all connected in a very unique way that it didn't feel like anything was being taken away from us in a way, because, we were all socialized just differently. And I think we all felt that we had a purpose. And so I didn't really feel like I missed out on a lot. Like I met a lot of my friends later. I still have friends from South Africa that I'm connected with and do things with. We obviously got up to some bad things every once in a while, but that's always relative also, which is hilarious now looking back. I'm like,
What do you mean?
I'm like a relatively bad situation for a ballet student versus a normal student.
Is what? Give me an example.
Oh, God.
For me, for a normal student, it was, smoking cigarettes outside the back of the school and then not skipping class to go have a.
Yeah, no, there was definitely no skipping class. I mean, we would skip class. We would go to the Max on the corner and just buy some stuff, and some kids would probably.
You can't get in trouble anymore, right? They can't. You can tell me that you can't get in trouble anymore.
We'll talk about that off air.
Karen Kane is still looming in Siphe's mind. Karen Kane's going to come down into this conversation and take him off the stage. And you had a cigarette when you were 16?
Right.
Say goodbye to the nutcrackers, Siphe. Speaking of Karen Kane, when you were 17, it strikes me that you said to me earlier, I said, how are you feeling about, being 14 and being at the National Ballet School, and when did it click? And you said, well, the movement clicked, the dance clicked, the expression clicked, but I didn't know whether or not I was going to join a company. So when you're 17, right, that's when Karen Kane invites you to join the corps. What are you able to breathe a sigh of relief there?
Yeah, the biggest sigh of relief, because it came at a time when we're all deciding our futures, where we want to go, where we want to audition, what kind of companies we want to join. And, there's a lot of voices just with other students of like where they see themselves and where they see each other. Like, people telling you can't join this company because of everyone just has their own ideas of what they want for you. And to have an email with one of the greatest ballerinas to ever walk the earth asking you for a meeting with her at 17, in the midst of all this, right, in my mind of like, oh God, like what kind of company can I join, like blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, you're not good enough for this company, maybe try this company. But you're like, but I want to be in this company, to get that email for a meeting and for her to express how much she wanted me to join the National Ballet and to support me in my career moving forward in that time was probably one of, if not the greatest day of my life, one of, for sure. And I, breathed a huge sigh of relief.
Why? Because
incredible.
hey, I'm going to be all right, or?
Yeah. And I wanted to join the National Ballet of Canada, but I just didn't know if it was possible, and I wasn't sure if that's what they needed also in the roster.
What do you mean? Like, I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah, so I mean, the company is 70 dancers, 75 dancers, And when typically in the core, it's kind of homogenized in a way because, heights, looks, because, the core is always the main event in the ballet, and it's always nice when it looks kind of similar.
Uniform.
Uniform, exactly. So, so I was kind of like, will I fit the roster in that sense?
Because you're black?
Yeah. Your face you made is so funny.
I didn't know if you were talking about your height or you were talking about
both.
Yeah.
So I remember the year before I auditioned, the minimum.
What face was I making? What face was I?
Genuine, because you're black.
I didn't know if you meant my height or like. Listen, I don't know anything about ballet.
All of the above.
Or whether I couldn't lift my leg. I don't know.
No, it was just funny.
Okay.
Genuine confusion. Yeah, it's obviously ballet is typically white, and at the time the company was looking for 5'11" men.
Yeah.
To fill a spot. So I'm like, well, I'm not 5'11", and I'm definitely not Caucasian.
Yeah.
So, but for her to reach out to me and to express her interest was huge. It really it allowed me to feel wanted, and needed.
Yeah.
And not only in the company, but in ballet. And for her to express that in that way was really, really important for a young kid like me at the time.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you feel any of that when you were at school? Like you must have. You must have felt. What do I want to say here? Like what does it do to you as an artist, as a person when you're walking into these kind of spaces like the National Ballet School when you got there, and I mean the National Ballet had a black core member before you.
Yes.
But not while you were there. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean for you to I guess what I'm asking is personally, what does it do for you when you're in these spaces and everyone else doesn't look like you?
Yeah. No, I mean at the ballet school, my best friend is black, and because the school is so international, and I came in at such a young age. To me, I was in awe of just how many everyone spoke different languages.
Yeah.
And that was really cool and interesting, I remember there was a black kid who spoke French, and I never met someone who spoke a completely different language that was black before at age 11, right? I was like, wait, what? Where are you from? So the world to me just opened up in a crazy way. But obviously the art form itself, is still quite, a little behind in that sense.
And the company, like when you got to the company too.
At first in the company, for sure, it wasn't as diverse as it is now.
Yeah.
And I think this is the most diverse the company has ever been in its history. And so I felt a little pressure, but soon after I joined, I think I'd had a lot of conversations with management and Karen at the time, just about the importance of diversity, and not just in color, but also, in heights, and having a company that really is diverse, because I just hated feeling alone, mostly. I just didn't want to feel like I was the only one. And so I always expressed the importance of that to the team.
I mean, it strikes me that that's something to sit down with Karen Kane, who is, she could be on the Looney.
Right. She should be in the Looney, actually.
Can we get her on the Looney, Cora? Let's get her on the Looney.
ASAP.
Let's get her on the Looney ASAP, actually. You know what we don't need on the Looney? A loon. Let's get
Karen.
Come on, let's get Karen on there. It strikes me that that's something, Siphe, to sit in front of Karen Kane at a very young age, because you're still young now, but you were even younger then, and have conversations with her about why diversity is important in the art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to be heard really was the nice thing about it, and to feel like I could express myself to someone like that. When I look back now, that's huge.
Yeah.
And for them to listen. And obviously, inevitably, the world a few years later went, in 2020, and the Black Lives Matter movement really picked up.
Oh, this is before that.
This was before. This was 2017, 2018, 19, when I was having these conversations. Obviously, it was always more of just a suggestion, it wasn't activism. It didn't feel like activism. But I think if you don't express the things you see around you, sometimes, things can get a bit out of whack.
I wanted to ask a little bit about when you became principal dancer. So let me just make sure I got the timeline right. In 2020, you become first soloist. When you were 22, you get promoted to principal dancer. Listen, if you're like me, you don't know that much about about ballet. It's where essentially you're the lead or one of the leads in the ballet. If there's a prince, generally you're the prince. If there's going to be if there's going to be a Romeo, chances are
I'll be Romeo.
You're Romeo, baby. Not a lot of dancers make it to that point. Very, very, very few dancers make it there so young. What do you remember about where you were? And tell me the story. Where you were, what happens when you get that call?
Oh my God. Okay, so this was still kind of during COVID, getting out of COVID era. I was in London with my brother, and I remember we were doing a virtual one because obviously we couldn't all gather.
A virtual meeting?
A virtual, announcement. We would all log in, and it was a video of Karen announcing promotions and talking about next season.
Advocating for the loony.
Exactly. Early days. We've been campaigning for a while, actually. And I remember it was midnight in London, and I was like, oh man, what's going to happen? I wonder if I'm going to get promoted. I think I'm going to get promoted.
Did you really think you were going to?
You always doubt yourself. You just know, because no one knows until she says who it is, right?
Yeah.
And the computer glitched. So the whole thing was glitching. And my brother's like, CP, I'm just going to go to sleep. I can't stay up for this. Like this, I don't care. I don't care. We'll find out in the morning.
Thanks,
either
man.
way.
Appreciate
I was like,
that.
This could be the biggest moment of my life, but whatever. So he goes to sleep. The thing glitches. They upload it in full instead of live streaming it. And I just skip. I'm just like, let me go to the end. And then there's a picture of me. And then Karen says a few nice words. And I just started screaming. I woke my brother up. But he was just like, what's going on, man? I'm like, I'm a freaking principal dancer. And he was like, what? And then he goes back to sleep. In the morning, he wakes up. He's like, wait, did you get promoted or did I dream that? I was like, I did get promoted to principal dancer. He didn't remember it. He was just like, was I having a dream? I was like, no, it was not a dream. And that's how I found out.
Exciting news.
Yeah.
Bit of pressure too?
Immediately. But I like pressure. I don't mind pressure. I think from a young kid, coming here was pressure. Going through the ballet school was pressure. Getting to that point of promotion was pressure. And so not to be, I don't know how to say this, but pressure, I like it. I don't mind it. When it comes to dance, I'll take it any day.
You're currently rehearsing the lead role of Basilio in Don Quixote, which will be on stage in June. It's the North American debut of this version of Don Quixote, choreographed by Carlos Acosta. I was reading about Don Quixote in the ballet world over the weekend, and I learned that among dancers, and you'll have to correct me on this, has a reputation for being a very fun ballet to perform.
Yes, indeed.
What makes a ballet fun? Because it just seems like a lot of work to me. so what makes a ballet fun to perform?
I think it's the spirit of the choreography. It's the music.
What do you mean the spirit of the choreography?
Ballet is quite rigid a lot of times. So when you're performing a ballet like Swan Lake, there's a lot of it has to be done a specific way.
Yeah.
In order for it to be successful. Whereas Don Quixote, for example, we're playing real people. So that allows for a lot of freedom, because you have to be a person on stage. You don't have to act like a person. You just have to be a person.
I don't understand the difference.
For example, when you play a prince,
yeah,
you have to walk a different way. You have to walk through your feet. Your back has your posture. You have to be very careful of how you are presenting yourself with your posture. And also, the steps are quite pure classical steps.
Yeah.
Everything has to be neat and clean and perfect. Whereas Basilio, you're having a pint on stage.
Just a dude.
Just a guy. You're just a guy. And in order for it to be light, in order for it to be real, you have to be real with just how you would have a drink. and how you would, be in the market, and, you would be talking to people or scream or say, hey, or, all those things are part of this production.
Okay, so it's a little bit more to what we were just talking about at the beginning. The idea that you can express yourself a little
Exactly.
bit. You can express yourself a little bit more.
Exactly.
Like you were hoping to do when you were a kid.
Yes, sir.
I'm getting it.
Yeah, no, you got it.
Thanks, man.
You got it.
Yeah, sure.
you really do, actually.
Well, I have a question about that later. But yeah, you're going to be performing a lead role in the upcoming production of Jules in June, choreographed by the legendary George Balanchine. It's an abstract piece. It's a ballet without a plot. Each act represents a different precious stone. Each act, I learned, based on a different composer. The one you're in, Rubies, is based around the music of Igor Stravinsky, so a little more jazzy.
Yeah, complicated.
Yeah?
Jazzy and complicated. I'm a very musical person, I like to say, but wow, Stravinsky really challenges your musicality.
Well, there's no this.
Nope. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Why am I counting at 11 before I start dancing?
It's hard.
It's hard, but it's a hard score. I don't know how Balanchine did it. It's really difficult.
Balanchine gets talked about. Listen, like Balanchine gets talked about in the way that, I don't know, like Hendrix gets talked about, or like Beethoven gets talked about, or Van Gogh gets talked about. Like, but I don't know enough about it. Can you give me an example of what, like, when you're dancing Balanchine's choreography? Are you going like, oh, this was what made him so great?
Yeah, I mean, he created his own really style and technique of dance, and created so many amazing works. I mean, his canon of works is just so deep. There's so many Balanchine ballets, and his relationships to composers is really something that, like the Marius Petipas of the world who choreographed the classics were very close to the composers, that made those ballets. And so that composer-choreographer relationship was really legendary, and it's something that, he was so good at. And so he was a great collaborator. It really pushed ballet to a new place, into a new era. And so I think that's why he's so, legendary. I mean, in so many other ways, he made some of the most amazing ballerinas of many generations through his works.
But do you feel it when you're dancing? When you're dancing a Balanchine piece, or you're like, oh, this is a little tougher, or this is a little more beautiful, or...
I mean, they're all so different. I think it's just tapping into the style that is so interesting with Balanchine, because, it takes ballet to a different place. Really, he stretches ballet, classical ballet training in a lot of ways. And Rubies is fun, and it's quite cheeky. It's colorful. It's very athletic. But it has this jazzy feel to it, and it's weird to be like, I'm still doing classical ballet, but why do I feel so, my hips are not really placed properly, And it's like, that's what they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be off balance, and yeah.
Supposed to be is interesting, because I wanted to ask you, just before we go, I have a couple of sort of bigger questions for you. And one has to do with the idea of perfection. When we rehearse, ideally, we are supposed to get close to perfection. And as a dancer, I have to imagine there's safety concerns when it comes to perfection. You have to be perfect so the other person can be perfect. You have to be precise, but there is no perfection. So my question is, are you a perfectionist? And do you have to be one to be a great ballet dancer?
I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to dance. I'm an expressionist.
Tell me.
I think the work behind the scenes I take very seriously, and I try to be as precise as I possibly can be, but I know at the end of the day that in order for me to really be able to express myself, I have to pursue perfection. I have to try to be perfect, but I'm not. I don't know. I'm not like. It's the perfection is in the trying. It's not in the execution. That's what I would say.
I understand. You have to aim towards perfection to be great, but you're not someone who's going to beat themselves up.
Exactly.
If you can't make it.
If I can't make it, and it's perfection is that I tried, 100%. that's where it is, and then the rest is up to the circumstances.
Okay, second big question around ballet I have for you has to do with me, because I made a joke earlier that I don't really get it, and you said, no, you kind of do. And I think that's because it's something that I really found out that I liked later. When I got this job, I got invited to see the National Ballet, and I really fell in love with it. I really got something out of it. And it strikes me, there's a lot of people who may think that ballet is not for them. And maybe it's because there's no one who looks like them when they watch it. Or maybe it's because they have sort of incorrect, maybe for me it was like I have sort of some incorrect perception of what ballet is, or they've never seen it live or anything like that. I've been wondering what someone could have told me before I went to see it, or could have told me that I would have had a more open mind about it. So I'm going to put you on the hot seat here a little bit. I wonder if you could just talk to people and just tell them what you find so powerful about ballet as an art form.
I mean, ballet is incredibly, it encompasses so many things that we all love as people: movement, athleticism, artistry, visual, music. And so I think if you're into any of those things, even the slightest, you can love ballet, because you can find that in every ballet. You can find that in every production. If you just love visuals, there's something to fulfill every part of your artistic interest in ballet.
What do you love about it?
I love that I love moving people, and I love taking people on a journey through movement, and I love that I can kind of guide people to be able to see themselves in the world a little bit differently, and to have interest in the world in a different way, and hopefully help them kind of reach different parts of who they are.
And you can do that through ballet, hey?
100%. 100%.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
How?
Come watch me.
Answer of the year.